Welcome and namaste to the Golden Child Podcast, the podcast to help you to reconnect with your inner child to live the life you truly desire. And you're our awesome intro.
On five.
Welcome back, guys. Today we have Richard directly from the States as our guest. Thank you so much, Richard, for coming to the Golden Child Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me here. This is an honor.
So, Richard, why don't you introduce yourself to our audience, your background, experience, spiritual journey, mission, and basically what you're doing also at the Light News Institute that you created?
Well, I started out with a very practical experience. My dad used to own a shipyard in San Diego, California. So I started out working for my father. I was a machinist, machine shop foreman. I ran the cranes and the tugboats and lots of practical experience. And then went into aerospace, became an engineer, had final assembly responsibility for space launch vehicles, been to Cape Canaveral many times. So lots of practical experience is my point. And then in the very late 80s, I started asking the really critical questions, what are we doing here? How did we even come to be here? So I was one of the very first students in 1992 at a university called the California Institute for Human Science, which is a graduate school and research institute into mind, body, spirit. At that time, there were 3 students and 3 faculty. And
Nice.
of course, we'll get into that later, but as of today, I'm still there as a core faculty, and I'm the chair of the board of trustees for the university. And we just became accredited 2 years ago this month. But on the other side of the equation, I really wanted to know how it is that we're here intuitively, not just academically, but more, say, esoterically. So I began a ministry, a spiritualist ministry. I began looking more intuitively through meditation and use of my intuitive abilities into how did we even come to exist here. So I focused on the chakras. And I found over the years that my passion was to be able to do healing and reading sessions for people where I could discern a theory that one chakra might be more dominant than the others. So that just kind of snowballed over time between the academic side with the institute and the esoteric side into where I am today with, having books published and having my own school of energy medicine called Integrative Chakra Therapy with over 500 students and graduates in the US and Canada. So this just kind of keeps having a life of its own, this love of how do we actually come to be here and what role do the chakras play in awakening ourselves so that we overcome the illusions that cause us to feel separate from what we seek. So one thing just keeps adding to another. And so basically, there's just 2 sides to what I do. There's my work with the Institute, of course, but there's also my work here with Integrative Chakra Therapy, which is the name of my school, with the Light News Institute, which is the overarching institute that I created for myself. And my wife and I also started a wellness center a year ago, September, called the Bamboo Garden Wellness Center, which is where I'm zooming to you from here in a part of San Diego on the coast called Encinitas. It's kind of a mecca for spiritual people. The Self-Realization Fellowship is here, Paramhansa Yogananda, and yes, it's just a very lovely place.
Fantastic.
That's a
So,
lot in a short time.
yeah, no, you did great, by the way. Really, really straight to the point. I love it. And for our listeners, which is super interesting. So I'm here from Trieste, Italy, and Richard is from San Diego, California. 9 hours difference. Okay. And you see the power of podcasting. I mean, the technology, we can use it really browsing and scrolling or really connected with beautiful and wonderful souls like Richard and really become, better people, authentic, develop ourselves. And, the work that you did and you're doing with the chakra is truly, truly inspiring. And let me ask you, did you start immediately with the chakra system, or was it like has been introduced to you like in a later stage? And also, did it make sense to you, the chakra system, the first time that they revealed this to you?
This would have to be around 1987,
Okay.
and I was just flirting with this knowledge. I really knew very little about the esoteric aspect of the human being, the metaphysics.
Hmm.
So I did what anybody would do. I started going to healing fairs, psychic fairs. I started talking to people who were doing this work, whether they were shamans or intuitives or spiritualist reverends. And as I said, I joined a spiritualist ministry. And so very soon I had questions about these things called chakras.
Yeah.
Well, what are those? Oh, well, there's 7 energy centers up and down the spine, and I thought, okay, that's really interesting. But I really wanted to know more how they work,
Yeah.
not just, they're associated with a color, a musical note, a nervous ganglia, and so forth. I thought, well, how is it that the higher aspect of ourselves that's not related to space and time fuses or merges with our physical self? So that just became an instant focus and just kind of blossomed from there. Because the more I focused on it, the more I started noticing in the people that I worked with certain patterns, like certain people would seem to be more dominant in one chakra than another. So I started noticing these patterns and making notes. And eventually that's where the books and the lectures and the teachings came from.
So your book, Eye of the Lotus, which is, by the way, Psychology of the Chakra, explores the ancient concept of chakras and how they can help us in our daily lives. So basically, according to, I don't know, Wikipedia, Google, or many books, the chakras are a spiral, basically energies. There are seven, but what I like about your book is that you got beyond that. And you said that basically, let me see, they're very connected with instincts, emotions, thoughts, and spiritual connection. You got, I would say, a much deeper level of understanding of what chakras are. So could you please explain to our audience what the chakras are? You can give them your definition, what you think is the most appropriate in plain English, and also let's go deeper of the so-called standard definition of chakras.
Sure. Well, for those of you that are new to chakras, they are described as 7 energy centers lined up more or less with the column of your spine. One is where the root of the body is, where your legs join your body. Number 2 is below the navel. Number 3, above the navel. 4, the heart. We all know that one, which is where it is. 5 is the throat. 6 is the sixth chakra. Sometimes people call it the third eye chakra. And the 7th is the crown. So most people look at the chakras like centers of energy, like fuel, gasoline,
Mm-hmm.
electricity, energy. But they're much, 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 much more than just that. And they actually transform a form of energy called spiritual energy or psi energy, PSI, into the chi or the ki that you experience in your body. So, for instance, your third chakra, the solar plexus, would take a spiritual energy and transform it into the chi, send it to the spleen. Spleen puts the chi in the blood. So you're good to go. But those are still really mechanical, anatomical descriptions.
Mm-hmm.
To me, my opinion is that chakras are conduits of consciousness. They are the conduits between the physical self, where you have a physical mind and body, the astral self, which is not related to space or time, where you have an astral mind and body, and a causal mind and body. And both of these higher aspects are what the Vedas called the yoga bodies, where
Mm-hmm.
the two, the astral and the causal, are not limited to space or time, but they're still unique. And that's where a lot of people go, wait a minute, that makes no sense. How can it be unique but beyond space and time? But that's exactly how they work. And one of the founders, the founder of the California Institute for Human Science, was a realized yogi named Dr. Hiroshi Motoyama.
Hmm.
And he was also a scientist to help prove that this is true, this is real. So the point being, you have chakras in this body, but you also have the same chakras in the astral and the causal bodies. And those chakras regulate 4 archetypes of the whole human being. And this is what fascinated me because, yes, they affect your physical body, each one uniquely, not the same, but they also affect mental, emotional, and spiritual aspects. These 4 archetypes are what are called the whole human being. I mean,
Yeah.
if you even look at an average tarot deck, the 4 minor arcana are divided into cups, wands, pentacles, and swords. Those are the 4 archetypes of the whole human being. Cups is emotions, swords is mental, pentacles is physical, and wands is spiritual. So I started thinking, okay, these chakras regulate the flow of consciousness between dimensions. And so this is why the yogi says, well, Enrico, it's really a good idea if you awaken your chakras through meditation and yoga philosophy. And so you start to awaken your chakras, but you don't just awaken these. You start to awaken the astral and causal chakras. It's the same chakra 3 times, but as you awaken it, your awareness goes way beyond conceptual thinking or imagination, way beyond 5 sense perception intellect. And this is what is known as an awakening. So that's what fascinated me. And I started noticing that certain people, people would have one chakra more dominant than the other. Let's say heart.
Yeah.
And so it's like saying you're right-handed. Well, there's nothing wrong with your left hand. You just use your right hand more. So it's not like saying if your heart chakra is dominant, the others don't matter. It's just that that's the one you tend to perceive reality through more than the others. And so my theory is that each chakra has one or more psychic abilities. The heart chakra would be empathy and symmetry.
Yeah.
And so you might use empathy more than the abilities in your other chakras, but they're all working. Chakras are
Yeah.
open 24/7. They're never closed. They're never blocked,
Hmm.
but they can be strong, weak, dormant. And
Yeah.
in most people, the chakras are dormant. That's not a bad thing, but they're all functioning. And another misconception is that the higher chakras on the body are better than the lower chakras.
No,
And in my
absolutely not.
opinion, it does not work that way. They're all vital and they're all important.
Absolutely. Um, for example, I regarding the literature of chakras, I read several books. One of from Anodius Judith, Perakis, and Joe Dispenza. From their approach and your approach, I to Lotus, what inspired you from their work and what you changed compared to what they teach basically in their workshop and their books?
Initially, I stayed away from reading other books on the chakras because in the forward of my book, I said, this is a book of my opinions. It's just my opinions. And I didn't want to be influenced by other people's writings uh, at first. And, some of the authors will tell you that when you're born, you go through the first chakra and you go through the emphasis of the first chakra. Then
Hmm.
in a few years, you go through the second
Yeah.
chakra. Then in a few years, you go through the third. So the thing is about every time there is an author, there's going to be a perspective and a perception.
Hmm.
And even if, let's say, I'm fully awakened yogi and I can float up off the ground, and I'm still going to have my own perception and perspective. So, Joe Dispenza, Anadia Joseph, Carolyn Mace, they're all going to have an orientation of how they feel the utility of the chakras works and how it affects our consciousness,
Hmm.
our way of perceiving reality. So I pretty much stayed focused on the way that I see it, but I think, all roads lead to the evolution of our consciousness. They all do. It's just like some people feel in their intuitive abilities they need to see something called a clairvoyance,
Yeah.
but everyone has intuitive faculties. They just might not work the same. So a person might be clairaudient, somebody might be clairsentient, where they just know. Some people may be empathic, where they just feel. Some people psychosensory, where they just feel it in their body. So when I teach psychology of the chakras at the university, I do use other people's books. I do use Anadia Judith rather, and I do use Carolyn Mace and another one by the name of Nardi who brings in um, Carl Jungian approaches and how
Okay.
that intersects with the chakras as well.
That's very interesting. You know, I took some courses with Anodia Judith, and what I
Oh,
really like what you said, because the vast majority of the courses I took about on chakra system is the chakra is blocked. They all say block, 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 block. But in my
yeah.
opinion, they're not really blocked. I would say for me, chakras is remembers like a pulse, like imagine like a river that is flowing, and then there are, you know, some maybe branches and trees there they don't allow the energy, cosmic energy, whatever you want to call it, to flow properly. But I think
Mhm.
every chakra, even like the most unbalanced man or women, has, you know, some opening. I wouldn't say it's completely
Yeah.
blocked. So I would say just that the water, for me, I don't know,
Mhm.
it just resonates with me. The water just flowing more than the others. And I
Mhm.
like this approach because by saying, oh, your first chakra is blocked, it's like saying that
Yeah.
there is something wrong in you. There isn't anything wrong,
Yeah.
but probably there is something that we could connect.
Mhm. Yeah, the to me the chakras are never blocked or closed. If your chakras are closed, you wouldn't be here. But the terminology I use is strong, weak, excess, deficient,
Yeah.
um, and they're just terminologies that I teach my students so that they can use an interpretation. So like if your heart chakra was excess, that's not a bad or a good word, but the practitioner then takes a look at that and says, well, what does excess mean to you? Because I could have a muscle that has excess heat because I just went to the gym and I worked out for an hour on this muscle and it has excess heat, but that doesn't make it a bad thing. So we have to be not so much careful, but a little bit circumspect in how we judge the function of a chakra when chakras have no moving parts. It's the same way that some people feel that chakras spin. They don't spin because chakras are not limited to space or time. Therefore, there can be no physical motion, but they give the impression of spinning. They give the impression of movement. So artists who draw chakras that look like they're spinning, yes, it can seem like that, but the chakras of themselves don't necessarily have a spin. They don't necessarily have the same color. Like a lot of people that look at the heart chakra, they see like this image behind me, they see green, but in the Vedas, different authors in the Vedas would say, well, the heart chakra is a beautiful crimson color. And another author says, oh, the heart chakra is a beautiful cloud-like color. So it's not so much the color, it's the pureness of the color that matters. It's the
Yeah.
coherence of the color that matters. It is how clearly we can gently stimulate in a safe way the chakras to continue to awaken that gives us that higher level of awareness. So if someone looks at you and says, oh, Enrico, your throat chakra is a beautiful red color, well, to them, it may appear red, but maybe not optically. It may appear red in this dimension of space and time where a certain wavelength, like 660 nanometers, is red.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
beyond that, in the next dimension, my teacher said that there are colors in the higher dimensions that are brighter and more vivid than in this dimension, but they appear to us as colors.
And let me ask you, how did you come up with the title of the book, The Eye of the Lotus? And if there is any reference or connection with one of the most important or famous mantra in the world, which is Om
Mm,
Mani Padme Om. Praise the jewel of the
yeah.
lotus.
Yeah, I had been looking at titles for my book for some time, feeling what it would be. And I thought, well, what would it be if it was the eye of the lotus, the eye that sees, through the heart of the lotus? So my way of looking at it is that, we start off in the mud. And then as we grow, we send forth a tender shoot through the waters of our emotions until finally, we kind of overcome the emotions and we put our little leaves out. And then eventually, we have a flower that faces the sun, but we're always connected to the mud from whence
Always.
we came. So this is kind of like when I was looking at how the chakras work, as the chakras awaken, and makes my hair stand on end to say this, is that they merge the astral and physical dimensions as one. Just like the Nobel laureates that tell you everything's non-dual, consciousness is pervasive, we're just localized consciousness receptors. But that's where I got, oh, eye of the lotus. Okay, I see how we are connected, spirit and body, astral, causal, and physical as one. And still, we are all of that together. And as we awaken, as we expand, we collapse. As we
Beautiful.
expand, we collapse the difference between the physical and astral self until ultimately there's no difference. You are it, it is you. So, interestingly enough, as soon as I came up with the title, or rather, yeah, that within 2 weeks, Lotus Publishing contacted me and wanted to publish the book.
I don't think there's a coincidence in that. And by the way,
No.
it's a beautiful, beautiful reference with the lotus. It reminds me of two things. One of the books of Chinat An, No Lotus, No Mud, which is a very, sorry, no, No Mud, No Lotus. Sorry, No Mud, No Lotus. And also, I really like the reference with Avatar from James Cameron. For me, it's my favorite movie, really. And when they say Navi, I see you. Well, Ngati Kameya. For me, it isn't just see you, and I see the body, the mind,
Mm-hmm.
the emotion, your soul. I see you completely, the astral
Mm-hmm.
part of you. I can see your core. And I don't know, for me, the Eye of the Lotus is kind of symbolizes this concept of the Navi culture, Nomad no Lotus. It's
Mm-hmm.
beautiful, Richard. I really, really like how you picked up the name.
When I give a lecture, I show a drawing that a yogi or yogini made. It's kind of like a pen and ink drawing of the person sitting, but all of the channels of energy in the body in Sanskrit. Very, very old drawing. And so I talked to my students and I said, at one point, a man or a woman sat down and sketched out all these chakras and energy patterns, which was the beginning of acupuncture. I said, but think about it. Don't you see that right now, today? You might not be aware that you see that, but isn't it still there? I mean, do you think that only happened 1,000 or 2,000 years ago and that was it? Somebody saw it and gave it to us today. So the point is, it's there. We may not be aware of it. So that as a person awakens themselves spiritually, you start to become aware of what already exists. Then, as you start to see things more as they are than as they appear to be, you change your perspective, which for people that have trauma, which is one of the things you and I chatted about before this podcast, is how do people relieve their trauma? Well, for one thing, may I continue? Is that okay?
It's totally
Yeah.
fine. I could listen to you for hours, Richard. It was really, really inspired talking, really.
For one thing, 95% of all communication is not verbal or physical. It's consciousness. We're constantly
Mhm.
connected to each other. So there is a phrase that I coined called co-creative conscious collaboration. Co-creative conscious collaboration. So what does that mean? It means we're constantly, through our chakra centers, sending out consciousness that brings the people, the circumstances, and the resources into our lives that represent the possibility for our emancipation. So let's say a person has a trauma early in life. Well, there's still a spirit that has a human body. And so they're sending out this information that will bring the appropriate healers or connections into their life that facilitate the emancipation from the trauma. So this is ongoing all the time, all
Yeah,
the time, where consciousnesses are constantly working together all the time. Things you wouldn't think about. Like if you have a little hummingbird that feeds on a certain flower, it's called biological oscillation. It's how does the bird from the animal kingdom merge with the flower from the plant kingdom so that the beak and the flower fit exactly. This is a
fantastic.
kind of a consciousness between two different kingdoms, the plant and the animal, that work together to conserve energy. So you and I, we're doing that all the time. We're connecting all the time on all levels to bring people and events into our lives that represent our growth. So the trick is that when a person is conscious, they're also alert. They're thinking, this must be one of those moments that I brought this person into my life to help me to do this, to facilitate a divine blueprint that you already have, and to emancipate you. One of my favorite saints is Paramahansa Yogananda, and he said, one cannot be any closer to God than you already are, but you can reveal that closeness. And to me, that's what you and I are doing is we're helping people to empower themselves, to help them realize they've always had the power
Yeah.
to awaken themselves.
Uh, we have still 9 minutes for our podcast, and I want to change a little bit something, because something happened before the podcast. I don't think there is a coincidence that happened. I want to make a question out of it. So I was at the gym, okay, and I had a discussion with one of my colleagues, okay, and when I was angry, I felt like I kept my chill. He didn't, and I felt, of course, anger in my stomach. I would say that is the first level of anger. So, third chakra. So, my question is, why the third chakra connected to anger? Manipura chakra. And also, I realized when you are very angry, the anger doesn't go just in the belly, and I feel it exactly here in the sixth chakra, which is a lot of anger. When like someone is pissing you off, or you're like, we see that fire. So
Yeah.
I'm curious, why the third, why the sixth connected to anger during maybe a interesting discussion.
The each chakra has its own unique psychic abilities, one or more. And the third chakra is called incisiveness, which means to see things as they are. And so there's a strong sense of truth, uniqueness, and power in the third chakra, but also a strong sense of justice. So if you feel you've been unjustified or something that was not true,
Yeah.
you know, that can cause a very strong reaction in your sense of truth, justice, fairness, and your own unique way of seeing the truth. And the sixth
Mhm.
chakra is very much rooted in what's called bringing in the new paradigm. A paradigm is a truth or a set of truths that we embrace as our own greater truth. So the third and the sixth can sometimes work together, and then when it rings a bell like this is my truth, but that's not my truth, it can cause quite a reaction when you feel that something is absolutely not true for you, because the third chakra is personal. It's how you see the truth. So the chakra itself will set conditions called conundrums and dilemmas so that you will discern what is the truth for you, what is uniquely your truth. And the only way you can really help people is to hold to your truth. So if I go to the Dalai Lama and I say, Mr. Lama, please give up two of your principles and I'll follow you, he'll say, no, I cannot.
Yeah.
So it would poke against what you feel is true or just or fair for you. And then it can recruit the sixth chakra in a sense of the higher paradigm.
Fantastic. Best answer we could look for. And I want to do two reels for that. on Instagram because people are gonna benefit a lot. Why, when I'm angry, I feel pain in the stomach? Why, when I'm super angry, I feel that in my third chakra? I think it's going to be a very interesting discussion. Thank you, Richard. And my last question is that, which is my favorite. What would you say to your inner child if he was standing right beside you? And what would he say to you?
Well, the theme of your podcast is authenticity and the release of traumas. And, children have no caveat, they have no ulterior motive, they are just simply innocent. And so my inner child would say to me, be innocent and don't worry about what other people think and stay in fidelity to your own purpose. And your purpose gets revealed to you the more you feel how you see things, how it is for you uniquely. So my inner child would say, stay unique, doesn't matter what other people think, just stay in that place of innocence and all is well.
Fantastic. That's exactly what I was looking for. Like, I think, especially in the healing business, coaching business, there's a lot of non-authenticity. People that want to copy, they become copycats of someone, and I don't think it's helping a lot, you know.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
by developing your own craft, your own weapons, your own tools, call it whatever you want, you can become valuable. For example, you didn't copy, the Judas work, you didn't copy Joe Dispenza work
No,
or anything like that. You
no.
develop your own system, Richard, and it's
Yeah.
fascinating. Like, I know on this work, I know the Joe's work, and what you did is really fascinating because you found your own craft, you found your own way of explaining the chakra system, and that's, I think, what is missing in the vast majority of the businesses in the world: unicity, authenticity, and genuineness. So thank you so much, really, for answering all these beautiful questions. And I'm gonna say goodbye to our viewers and listeners, and thank you for tuning in this wonderful episode of the Child Podcast. And Richard, thank you so much for your time and this fantastic and meaningful insight that you shared with us today. Really, thank you so
Oh, you're
much.
most welcome. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
Thank you so much, Richard, and thank you, our listeners, for watching and listening to the Golden Child Podcast. Have a beautiful day. Namaste.